Okay. People are being let in now.
Chris or Brad, can you give me co-host responsibilities?
Hi, everyone. While we figure this out, we're really sorry about that. The link wasn't letting everyone in for a while, so we ended it and restarted, and I'm glad to see that everyone is able to join now. So let us resituate ourselves.
All right. So our agenda items for today, we're going to define computational thinking. We're going to give examples of each of the 4 pillars. We're going to go through some unplugged activities where there's no device necessary. We will also talk about our Bolt blocks activity cards to go through our blocks 1 through 8 activities. We'll have our Q&A, and of course, the favorite, our robot giveaway. My name is Brad Fessler. I am a professional development and content manager here at Sphero. I've worked in public ed for 15 years, teaching technology and engineering education, as well as some time in higher education. I'd also like to introduce Nikki.
Yes, my name is Nikki DiFilippo, and I had the amazing opportunity to work with Sphero over the summer in a program that you'll hear more about. And I've been teaching for over 20 years. And currently I teach 4th through 8th grade in Old Saybrook, Connecticut.
All right, thanks so much. My name is Todd. I'm an education content manager at Sphero. My background's in the classroom as a 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teacher. But now I spend my days curating and creating content to support educators and students with Sphero robots in the classroom. So to get started, I wanted to give you a little bit of background about where we're coming from and the background behind this webinar. And it really starts with Nikki and Nate. Nikki is the moderator on this webinar, and Nate is hopefully out there in the audience listening along today. Nikki and Nate were part of MindSpark's STEM Path program this past year. And a big part of that program was an externship, 6-week externship that they spent with Sphero last summer. So I hope it was valuable for Nikki and Nate, but one thing I know for certain is that it was very valuable for Sphero because having the perspective and the voices of practicing educators really helps us make our products better. It helps us improve the educational content and the support we provide alongside our products. So it was a huge benefit for Sphero. And they spent most of last summer really digging into computational thinking and how Sphero robots can be used to teach computational thinking in the classroom. And we were able to use a lot of their work as the basis for our 2022 CSforAll commitment. As some of you might know, CSforAll collects commitments from organizations across the United States and internationally. And these commitments the purpose behind them is to advance equitable and sustainable K-12 computer science education. This is a program that Sphero has participated in going back to, I believe, 2017. And our commitment this year was all about computational thinking. We produced a free downloadable computational thinking guide that you'll see in a moment. And the greatest thing about this guide is that it has parts that can be used in classrooms that don't have access to our robots or any technology at all. And you can start using these activities and parts of the guide to start developing computational thinking with students. And then it also has activity cards that go along with our robots. So if you have one robot in the classroom, or if you have a class set, you can use these cards to kind of, again, develop students' computational thinking skills. And another part of this commitment for this year is the robot giveaway that we're talking about at the end of this webinar. We're giving away 10 robots to educators who work in Title I schools. The next slide just shows the front page of this computational thinking guide. I think this link will appear in the chat magically, but if not, you can use the QR code or the short URL there And you will go to this guide where you can download it and use it as you see fit. We're going to spend the rest of the time today kind of walking you through the parts of this guide.
All right, so what is computational thinking? So computational thinking is a framework for solving problems. So on our next slide here, we're going to see a couple different definitions from 3 different organizations here. So a shorter definition here is that computational thinking is thinking or problem solving like a computer scientist. Something to keep in mind with computational thinking is that it is not just used in computer science. This can be used in everyday life. You have used computational thinking throughout many different projects or things that you have done, even things that you have done today. You just might not have thought of those pillars or steps you took to solve those problems. So some longer definitions here, we're looking at the problem-solving process that includes these characteristics, which is formulating problems in a way that enables us to use a computer or other tools. It's really, really important to understand that we have a lot of tools, not just the computer, and it includes robots and other things like that, but it doesn't have to be that, as you'll see when we get to our unplugged activities. You can see these are different definitions that came from CSTA and ISTE, and these are all of our different characteristics that go into a good computational thinker. All right, so on our next slide here, we can see our how we're relating the computational thinking and computer science. So how these actually relate to one another and how they're overlap. So we're able to solve problems related to computers on one side. We're able to solve problems in the world around us and address problems that are unrelated to computing. So today you got up, you tied your shoes. You probably know all those steps by heart. You don't think about those things, but our youngest students have to figure out those steps. And we can use computational thinking as the framework for solving that kind of a problem. Next, we're going to talk about the 4 pillars of computational thinking.
So with the 4 pillars, it's a definition that really helps with this framework with computational thinking. We have decomposition, which is simplifying problems, pattern recognition, abstraction, and algorithmic design. And throughout the PDF manual and throughout the slideshow, you'll see these different icons representing these 4 different pillars. So the first one, decomposition, is just breaking things down into manageable parts. So Nate and I came up with an example of even just planning a birthday party, because even the students and adults can relate to that, and breaking it down into the different pieces of food, decorations, where is it going to be, when is it going to be, and then breaking the food down further, and then down to the cake and further down to that as just an everyday example. And for pattern recognition, especially as educators, we see this everywhere. You see it in music, we see it in math, we see it in reading, and it's in programming and coding and working with the robots as well. And then abstraction, which is the one I always find the hardest to really get across to students and have them grapple with. And that's pulling out the information they need. So when we're teaching them how to research or how to represent something visually and really simplify it and present it just to get their meaning across. And then finally, the algorithmic design, or generating that logical sequence of steps to solve problems and just really making sense. I always take all this back almost to that original peanut butter and jelly activity that so many people have used, where you have all your ingredients and you have the students try to tell you how to do it, and it always ends up in a crazy mess back when we could actually have peanuts in school. And then that starts out with the decomposition, and how do they decompose that? And then pull everything apart, and then the algorithmic design brings it back into that recipe or those logical steps, pulling it all together. And in the handbook, what Nate and I did after we took these different pillars of the explanations, we wanted to bring examples, not only in everyday life and in school, but also in careers and at the different levels. So you'll see when you look at the handbook, you'll see the pillars and then the examples in everyday life. And then you'll end up seeing the unplugged activities as well that Brad's going to go into. But if you take a moment and look at some of these examples that we put together and see which pillar would you associate these with. So identifying motifs or repeating series of notes within a musical arrangement to not only learn the piece faster, but also how to understand how it evokes emotion in the listener. Which pillar would that be?
And please feel free to put your answer in the chat.
Yep, seeing a lot of patterns. Yeah, pattern recognition. And that's an example in everyday life that we put under the high school section. How about listening to a story and breaking it down into the setting, characters, plot, and resolution? I think everybody's hitting it right on. The decomposing the problem for like elementary school level. And a veterinarian reviewing a blood panel report to diagnose health issues. So a career example there. Yeah, abstraction.
Like we're doing abstraction.
What I really like about these examples, Nikki, is that sometimes it's hard to come up with those examples to give to students. Like you mentioned the peanut butter and jelly sandwich example, and it's like I feel like that's one of those examples that's used almost to the point where it kind of it takes over the whole pillar, right? And like just having a plethora of ideas or examples to share with students just helps that develop that understanding more. Okay.
All right, so now we're going to take a look at some unplugged activities. These activities were developed to help students understand each of the pillars of computational thinking. The cool part about these particular activities, there's nothing needed. So you don't need a robot, you don't need some kind of computer device. In some cases, you might need a paper and pencil or something like that to do these activities. So we'll go over two examples of these unplugged activities on the next slide here. So if you don't mind, try these activities as we'll go through. We'll give a couple seconds when we go through here. So the first activity we're going to take a look at is when you draw a picture, you take something from the real world or something from your imagination, right? And you make a representation of it. But no picture is ever an exact, perfect representation, right? So you have to add in those important details to make sure that the viewer can recognize that. So what we do in this activity is you get a piece of paper, a pencil, and you take 15 seconds to draw a lollipop. So if you have a piece of paper and a writing utensil near you, go ahead and take 15 seconds or so here and draw out a lollipop. As you're doing this, some things to think about are which features of this particular item are the most important. So what are the details that you need to be able to see to recognize it as a lollipop and not as something else, like a sign or a balloon or something like that? What are those important details? And then if you had more time on to add to this drawing, what details would you add to drive home the fact that this is a lollipop and not something else? And if you have any examples or any details that you think would be important for this particular example of a lollipop, go ahead and pop those in the chat to kind of share what you have there. Yeah, make sure there's a stick, add some color. Yeah, very good.
The swirl is what I think makes a lollipop to me.
Yep. The wrapper's
Oh.
a very good one. Yeah. Oh, adding a name. So some brand recognition there for the marketing folks, right? And this is an example of abstraction. So out of your 4 pillars, this would be a great way to help students learn the examples of abstraction. All right, in our next unplugged example, we're going to take a look at prime numbers. So doing this, you would write out a list of numbers 1 through 60 in rows of 10. So you can see in our graphic here, and then you would circle all of your prime numbers. And just as a reminder, right, prime numbers are numbers that only have 2 factors, the number 1 and the number itself. So it's only divisible by the number 1 or itself. The first 5 in our graphic have been circled for you, right? So you would go through, have your students circle all those numbers as they work their way through. And some things that you would want them to look for here are those patterns, right? So we're dealing with pattern recognition. And we want our students to be able to make predictions about which numbers will or will not be prime, and identifying the steps necessary to check whether the number is prime or not. So just having them work through that process and then being able to recognize that pattern, because this is an example of pattern recognition. All right, so those are our 2 unplugged activities. There are many more unplugged activities in our computational thinking guide. So make sure you go check those out. They're great ways to help teach our students these skills. Next, I think Todd is going to talk about our computational thinking activity cards using our Bolt robot.
Yeah, so for the technology component of this computational thinking guide, we put together, or Nikki and Nate actually put together these activity cards to go along with Bolt Blocks activities lessons 1 through 8 in the Sphero EDU app. So if you are familiar with the Sphero EDU app, when you open it and go to our activities page, these 8 activities are some of the first ones you'll see. They're the ones that are most commonly completed by educators, and they're some of our most popular programs. And the lessons 1 through 8 kind of take students on a programming journey, starting with their very basics of programming with Bolt, right? So in the first one, you're learning to make Bolt move, then show lights, and then play sounds. But by the end, you're programming Bolt and using variables in your programs and designing your own functions and things like that. So each of these eight lessons kind of help students develop their skills, not only with Bolt, but also with programming. And what these computational thinking cards do is they allow students to go a bit further, and they allow students to really reflect on how they're using computational thinking while they're completing the activities, or they allow them to extend those activities and do more and develop those computational thinking skills. There are 8 total cards. On each card, you'll have 1 suggestion for each computational thinking pillar. And you could print them or you could share them digitally with students. What I really like about the cards is that they give students another modality for accessing the learning in the lesson. And it's just a nice little differentiation tool for students to kind of grapple with and process the learning in the activities. Doesn't make much sense without an example, so let me talk you through an example. This is Bolt Blocks 4, the Bolt Blocks 4 lesson, and this GIF kind of visualizes what happens in the lesson. Students program a simple game where the bolt robot rolls forward at a certain speed until it bumps into an object. And that object, in this case, happens to be a foot, but it triggers an event. So that's why this is about the event blocks in the Sphero programming environment. And when it bumps into an object, the bolt robot stops, it plays a sound, and then it rolls in the opposite direction. The lesson will walk students through programming this activity, but where the card comes in, you can see it on the next one, is here's the small card in the upper left-hand corner. You can't read anything, but there's 4 suggestions on it. I've zoomed in on the algorithmic design, the bottom of the card, and it gives students a small suggestion. It says, change the order or swap out blocks in your human Pong game in a way that changes what happens, but the game still works. So you can see the on collision block below it. And this sequence of blocks is what the lesson kind of guides students to completing. But it asks students to swap it around. So if I were to take this play double beep sound and move it down below above the speed block, what happens? Well, only one way to find out to do it. In this case, it probably will work, although it might do things in different order. But if I was to take another block like the stop block and move that stop block below the speed block, then maybe my program wouldn't work. So it's really encouraging students to think about or to grapple with this idea that there are many algorithms that can be used to solve the same problem, right? And it allows students to see that there's different ways to accomplish the same thing. This is just one example. Again, there's 8 bolt blocks activities, so there's 8 activity cards, and on each of these cards there's 4 suggestions. So it really allows you to take these 8 lessons, which are designed to be like a one-day lesson, and extend them and deepen the learning in them. Nikki, Brad, did I miss anything on these?
No, I think you explained it. One thing that's really nice with these, though, is if you always have those kids that kind of finish first and want to know what's next, these cards really help give them something else to kind of play with and explore and do, while you really can focus in on some of the other students that might need more support, or you can even have them team up together or mix up with other students and try different things. So it really helps with classroom management as well.
Yeah, it's that extended thinking challenge for your students to take it just one step further, to have that deeper understanding of what they're doing. And if you haven't used this activity at all, I definitely encourage you to explore it. It's a fun one. The students enjoy it because they get up out of their seats and be able to test this, and it's just a lot of fun. All right.
So we're here at the Q&A. I really want to encourage you to go to this, use this short URL and jump straight to this guide. I'll even show you what it looks like. Sphero.cc CT guide. And then once you have it loaded up, you can download it, save it, bookmark it, send it out to other people, and use it. And please give us feedback on how it works.
Yep. And everything you saw today is part of this computational thinking guide. So the unplugged activities, the blocks 1 through 8 computational thinking cards, they're all part of that computational thinking guide. Let's see here. So question is, what is your main argument to convince colleagues to use or integrate computational thinking into their lessons? Speaking as a pedagogical perspective here. So it's a great question. So how do you convince your colleagues to do this? So it's just like any other problem solving framework, right? So whether it's the scientific method, the engineering design process, or, if you're familiar with little bits, we have our own process for little bits. So it's just like any other framework to do that. The good news about computational thinking, there's only 4 pillars to it. So it's a fairly simple set of steps to work through. Great question. As you go through there's many ways you could work on this to get your other other colleagues to work on this. Sell it as it's a simple process to work through.
And that
All
next one,
right.
the answer key, Brad, I can jump in on that one. So there are no
All right.
answer keys to go along with the activity cards. Most of those questions are kind of are open-ended. But that Mark asked that question about where can I get that sequence of blocks, and that is actually in the associated step on the lesson. So at the bottom of the educator tips, there are at the bottom of each step, there's an educator tip, and there are links in there to solutions that will get you started.
All right. The next question that's in there, which is a great question as well. What grade levels are addressed throughout these materials? Todd, do you have a?
Yeah, so the both blocks lessons, I think the sweet spot is grades 3 through 8, but those in the guide I think can go up and down on that. I mean, a lot of the unplugged activities, like the ones that Brad shared, particularly the first one about the quick draw, can go a lot younger. And the nice thing about the activities is they are starters. They're not going to be full lesson plans that are citing specific grade levels. They're little nuggets that are easily adaptable to different applications.
All right. Here's another question. What age range would you recommend for Bolt in general?
Yeah, again, this is like something where we have tried to say that Bolt robot is a good robot for students in grades 3 through 8, and then right when we say that, we hear really compelling use cases from 10th grade teachers and from 2nd grade teachers, right? So I think that's the sweetest spot is upper elementary and middle school, but again, it goes outside of those ranges pretty easily.
Yeah, absolutely. As a former high school teacher, grades 9 through 12, I use Bolt in my classroom to introduce computer science concepts and work through it. So it is a really versatile tool that way. One other question here. Are the Sphero computer science curriculum books an expansion of what we saw here today?
Yeah, so they are the Sphero computer science, I'm assuming computer science foundations books, course 1, 2, and 3 are a separate effort. But I would be very interested in seeing how these cards work with those, and a lot of these same kind of. But if you go through those activity cards and you look at the suggestions for each of the computational thinking pillars, and you read through those as a teacher, they'll give you ideas about how the questions to ask and the prompts to give to extend learning in lots of different Sphero activities. That's my hope. And I'd like to see how that plays out.
All right. Okay, it looks like we're wrapping up at the end of our Q&A session here. So the moment everyone's been waiting for, right, through this is our robot giveaway. And if you are a winner, you are able to choose between Indy or Bolt. Someone from our team will reach out to you if you are on this next slide to get your selection and shipping information to get that to you. So with that being said, do we have some winners here? All right. So we have 10 winners that are on here. Please take a look at this last slide. If you are on here, someone from our team will reach out to you shortly to get your selection and get your shipping information. Congratulations to everyone who won, and thank you all for joining us. I know a bunch of people are either on spring break or leaving for spring break, so we really appreciate you for being a dedicated educator and joining us today. Thank you very much. We all appreciate that, and we appreciate everything you do as an educator. All right. Thank you all for joining. Have a great afternoon.
Bye.